The last page has been turned on my most recent read, and it's another week and yet another book. It's the beginning of November already. I kind of can't believe that the year is going this quickly, but looking out the window, you can see it's definitely winter. A few very anticipated novels on my reading list are about to be released, and I've had a notification about one of them, though not the one I really wanted. And I have actually been reading up a storm, which I am very happy about. Anyway, let's get to the book. It's the 2012 novel In the Tall Grass by Stephen King and his son Joe Hill. Here to talk about it with me, because you know I am not a big horror fan, is Lorraine from the horror podcast Once Upon a Nightmare. Hi Lorraine.
Hello.
So here we are, as spoiler-free as we can be, definitely opinion-filled and ready to roll, all of which means it's time for the latest episode of Being Bookish. I'm your host Ray, self-confessed bookworm, introvert, hermit, long-term depression sufferer and ex-coffee addict. Join me on my journey through my ever-growing to-be-read pile and enjoy the latest of my 100% spoiler-free book reviews. In the Tall Grass was originally published as a two-part short story in 2 summer issues of Esquire magazine in 2012, which, when you think about the overall length of the novella, is not that surprising. And it was made into a film in 2019, which we discussed in an episode that Lorraine will be releasing very, very soon. So, to give you a very brief summary of the book, In the Tall Grass begins with a sister and brother who pull off to the side of the road after hearing a young boy crying for help from beyond the tall grass. Within minutes, they are disoriented in deeper than seems possible, and they've lost one another. The boy's cries are more and more desperate. What follows is a terrifying, entertaining, and masterfully told tale as only Stephen King and Joe Hill can deliver. It is, I have to say, it's very masterfully told because Stephen King really has a way with words. I'm not so familiar with Joe Hill's writing, though he has created Horns, which was made into a film with Daniel Radcliffe, and Nosferatu, which is a TV series, as well as writing the comic book Lock and Key, which I have read a few issues of. Did you know any of that?
No, when you said Lock and Key, I was like, oh, I did not know that.
I also didn't realise that he wrote Horns.
Nor did I. You're asking the wrong person.
Well, Horns is a horror movie.
I know, but I didn't know that. I haven't done anything with some horns, so that's my excuse.
Yeah, this is the second short story that Joe and Stephen wrote together. And it really is a very short story. It's about 40, maybe 50 pages, which surprised me because there is a lot happening in this short story.
Yeah, I was, because I read it on my Kindle and it was like, says something like 63 pages or something. And then I was on like 42 and it's like, you have 1 minute left. And I was like, what? But because it gave you a little snippet of Dr. Sleep.
Yes.
At the end of it. And I was like, like that. But yeah, it was really, and that's coming from me. But that's how I like it because you know me and sitting down for a long time doesn't really work very well. But I did it this morning. I just sat there. I was quite impressed with myself. But then my husband and child were away, so that made it a lot easier.
It does indeed. So this story is told in a very involved and very quick way. And if you've seen the film, which we have both watched and have recorded an episode on, which comes out after this episode, and there will be spoilers in that, but there won't be in this. There are massive changes between the book and the film. Mm-hmm. And I would actually say that the book is more graphically horrifying than the film, whereas the film I found more confusing.
Yeah, I did find the film confusing, but I didn't find this like that graphic at all. One scene, which I don't know if it's a spoiler, so I won't say it.
Yeah.
The scene.
Yes.
I'm gesturing. Is that a spoiler?
Yes.
Oh, bugger. Because I really wanted to talk about that.
Well, we can talk about the fact that Bex, one of the characters, Bex DeMuth, is who's one of the twins, is seriously heavily pregnant, and
Yeah, I think
she's on her way,
6 months. Yeah.
yeah, on her way with her twin brother Cal to stay with her aunt and uncle
Irish
until,
twins.
yeah, well, they're not really Irish twins
No, it's
because
just because they're so close.
they're
Yeah.
18 months apart in age, and Irish twins are born in the same year. But
Yeah.
it is, I found that definition a bit startling and thought, "Wow, that's factually incorrect." That was the first thing that struck me when I was reading it. But it is, they are on their way to their aunt and uncle's, where
Mm.
she is going to decide what she's going to do with this baby.
Mm.
And she only briefly mentions her boyfriend Travis, who in the film has a massive role to play.
Yeah, yeah, that's because I was waiting for that,
So
and
was I.
he doesn't appear, like, it doesn't happen, in this, and I also thought that in the film, I kind of felt almost uncomfortable about the relationship that the brother had towards her. Whereas in this, I didn't think that came across. And there was one particular line that I wrote down that I thought was a bit strange, and kind of just that one line summons up what they did in the film, where he goes, they did everything together, but he wasn't responsible for the bun in the oven. So basically not everything. And I'm like, that's a really strange thing to say about siblings. But because I'd watched the movie and how much the brother was a bit, you know, over the top with his sister, it almost seemed like he felt a bit more than that. And I'm not saying that they had some sort of weird relationship, but I just think he was a bit too involved. And I think that line for me kind of summed up the movie relationship more than this one.
But
That
there
makes
there was
sense.
also reference made to it in the flashback we had of Travis and Bex having a
Mm.
conversation when she's
Yes.
telling him that she's pregnant,
Yeah.
and Travis comments about how he thinks that maybe her brother may have been in the room at the time. He wouldn't have been
Yeah.
surprised. So other people obviously get that particular vibe from him, but
Mm.
you don't get it from him in the book as you do in the film.
No.
There's none of that. It's not massively creepy. But then there are a lot of things in this book. I think the scenes with Ross were
Ooh.
the bits that came across far more explicit, I think,
Yes.
in the book than in the film. He's despicable and disgusting character in the film, but in the book, he is far more, I
I
think.
agree with that. I agree
And I
with
don't wanna
that.
go too far because though this is obviously not a children's book by any stretch of the imagination, I don't want to give anybody else the nightmares that I've given myself for tonight.
Yeah, I thought that because obviously in the book it's oh, what's his name?
In the film,
Pa-
it's,
in the film, sorry, Patrick
Wilson.
Wilson. Yeah, and when you see him in the film, even though you know it's messed up and stuff, he kind of has this bit of a friendly demeanor about him. Whereas in this, even though I knew it was Patrick Wilson, I didn't picture his face because I think he's got a nice face.
Yes.
And, you know, like I said in the film, he was a bit gross. He's like disgusting. The way he speaks to her, the way he says he's going to do certain things to her on The Rock and all this kind of stuff. I think he went a bit too, it was very rapey.
Yes, as I said, it made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. There was
Mm,
something about him that in the film, he was unlikable, and
yeah.
um there were certain things about him that were insidiously snide. In the book, he is made 10 times worse
Yeah.
because of the way he acts towards Bex, obviously, because that's the only interaction we see. In the film, there are a lot more interactions. They meet up and they do manage to encounter each other again,
Yeah.
albeit it's not straightforward. And there seems to be a very, very strong time loop element in the film. In the book, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I think, I'll be honest with you. While I preferred the book because of how it was kind of, because I'm not a big fan of like filler and let's make this longer than it needs
Yeah.
to be, and I felt the film was like that.
It
So
was
I
an hour and
appreciate
40 minutes.
yeah, so I appreciated the fact that in the book it just kind of bam bam, it just gave us the story and I didn't have to really wait for it. Maybe that shows my impatience.
Oh, no, not
um
at all. I think it made me feel the film especially had a very Peter Jackson doing The Hobbit in three-hour films feel to it.
Mm. That's a good way of putting it, actually. Um, but yeah, but there were parts of it that after reading this, I think they did well within the film, you know, but then there were certain things that I didn't, I mean, I might have, I can't remember what we said in the episode, but just little things like when they talk about how they park up at the church to go across the road into the grass, and all the cars are like dirty, like they've been there for a while and there's nobody about, and it's like, why are all these cars there? Like, I didn't get that they questioned, and I don't think they did in the film, because we did that quite a while ago, didn't we? Recorded it, so I'm
We
just
did back
trying to
in
remember.
oh gosh, good grief, back in August, I think.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to remember it, but I felt like if you pull into a car park and it's in a remote place and there's all these cars and they're all abandoned and they're all covered in lots of dirt and people are screaming from a field, wouldn't you kind of be like, oh, hang on a second, like this is a bit weird? And then he talks about the burger with the maggots coming out of it, which we don't find out a bit longer. So I felt like there wasn't enough like concern about what is actually going on here. They just plowed on in,
Yeah.
and I
There was
thought
no
that was a bit
hesitation.
strange. Yeah, and you couldn't see because they couldn't see anything. And that's something that I find really claustrophobic about reading the book and watching the film, is I felt myself in that situation where you can't see where you're going. It's like a maze. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's it, and that is one of the things that I would definitely say is a Stephen King special, is the
Mm,
atmospherics. He is
mm.
incredibly good at the atmospherics. You think about The Body, which is another short story,
Mm.
or, the atmosphere he meant, the tension he built in Misery.
Yeah.
He is incredibly good at that. I mean, I'm not familiar with much of Joe Hill's novel work,
Yeah.
so I can't immediately go, "Oh, that is his writing." Whereas I can sit there and I can go, "That screams Stephen King." And a
Yeah.
lot of the setting up the story with the cars in the car park, and the mentions of how much money people will have raised for the glamorous spire on the church. Those are two little tiny details that seem insignificant, but they have massive meaning when you read the rest of the story.
No, I agree. And also, I think when because obviously they hear a little boy shouting and screaming, and that's why they go in there in the first place. But
Tobin.
also, Tobin, but also what kind of like would have made me step back again after the cars is they heard a woman saying, "No, don't come in, don't tell me to do that." And I personally would have taken that at the time as this woman's doing bad things to the child and she doesn't want me to come in to save him, even though actually what she was doing was, but the voice was basically telling you don't come in. So that would have been that would have made me go in more, because I would have thought, oh my god, this woman's going to hurt this child, I need to go in and save this little boy. Like, do you know what I mean? Do you remember? Do you not know
Yes,
what I'm
I
talking?
do.
Yeah.
I do remember. I'm trying to think, would I have done it? No. Mostly because I like to be able to see where I'm going. And as somebody who is of a shorter stature, that's not many places. So
I think
I,
everyone was short for this.
yeah, I don't think I'd actually go into the tall grass. I mean, the one thing is, how did they hear it over the music that they were playing in the car? How did they hear him over the music, the engine, and everything else?
I thought they said they weren't playing it in the book, or were they?
They were playing some music in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe the grass tries to draw you in,
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, that's it, isn't it? There's so many little elements, and they're all controlled by this mysterious rock in the middle of the field.
I can't remember whether in the film, and I only read this today, like I said, but we never really get an explanation for the rock, do we?
We don't get an explanation for the rock, though I believe it's tied into another creation by King.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because a lot of his work. Oh, actually, yeah, because I watched the TV show. Was it Black Rock? Where your one from Misery, Annie is
Yeah,
young.
Annie, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't remember what
Castle
it's
Rock.
called. That's
Castle
it,
Rock.
Castle Rock, which is
Yeah,
where he bases a lot of his books, Castle Rock, yeah.
yeah. Because it ties in with certain things, doesn't it? That was a great show, by the way. But so yeah, that would make sense for him to do that. So it would.
He likes his, connections, or no matter how tenuous they are.
Yeah,
It's one of his
I
tools.
I think as well. One thing it does really well is because you could imagine being lost in here and feeling so frustrated, especially when you can hear the people, and like in the film, you see them jump up. Remember, they jump up and they
And
can see each other.
they explain it in the
Yeah,
book.
yeah, and so you can feel that frustration of I can see you, you're right there, stand still, I will come to you, or you follow the voice. But they never seem to. I mean, obviously he meets Tobin and stuff, but they never. It should be easier than what it is. And that's what I like about this. I feel frustrated when I'm reading it because I'm like, they're just there. You can hear them. Why aren't you, So I think he does a really good job of making you feel what they're feeling.
Yeah, one of the biggest differences I'd say between this and the film
Mm,
is the motivation of the characters. Because while obviously Bex and Cal are trying to help Tobin and his mother, Tobin isn't as innocent as he appears. He
no.
does have, yeah, he does have sinister motives.
I felt he was more innocent in the film than in
Yeah, oh,
this.
absolutely, he
Yeah.
was more innocent in the film.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of giggling, isn't there? They talk about a lot of giggling
Yes,
a lot in this, in the book.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. They talk about far more about the way that they seem to be very, very similar,
Mm,
and there is that connection. And the only one who seems to have not found the connection is Bex. She's the only one who seems to be aware.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are certain scenes that we are not going to talk about, partially because they are um, horrific and partially because they could be considered massive spoilers.
You're on
But at
about the
the same
pregnancy
time,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Oh.
I know it is very frustrating, but we try not to spoil it, and you won't get the spoilers from the film either because they aren't the same. They
They're
really,
very
I was surprised at how different they were.
There is, I think there was a little similarity there. So I did.
Yes, but then it was all considered, that was all hallucinations.
Yeah. But I was thinking when I was reading that, I was watching it at the same time in my head because of a certain scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think once that they kind of get to that stage of it, up until then, it's scary, frustrating. What's going to happen? Like, had you not read the had I not seen the film, scary, frustrating. What's going to happen? But once it hit that scene that we shall not talk about, that is when it got into like horror territory for
It
me.
was, and it was graphically horror.
It
It was
was,
grotesque, actually.
yeah. But I think because I'd seen the film and what they did with regards to that scene, I was picturing that and the way they describe it um in the book, like when they say salty, when they talk,
Yeah.
and obviously someone's listening to this and they haven't read it and they're like, what are you on about? Tell us. I'm not going to because Ray will kill me. But when they say the word salty, I'm like,
Ew.
what? Yeah. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I just find it quite a stressful thing to think about this book.
I've just realised though, Stephen King likes his fields. Children of the Corn.
Does he do 1922? Isn't that kind of is that him? That's like in the Arsenal of Nowhere, isn't it?
Not sure, but he
Is that
wrote
him?
Children of the Corn,
He did.
and that's in
Oh,
fields.
he is. The only reason I don't know is it's set in a field, but I just put that on once. I didn't get to watch it. I just put it on briefly, and I remember there was a house surrounded by fields. I don't know. Oh,
Like,
and Isolation.
yes, isolation is another thing he
Maybe that's
uses
it.
as a tool very often, even in, I mean, we've talked about it very, very briefly in The Body. There is that
Yeah,
element of isolation because they're in a small town. The body is found somewhere way
in the
out in the middle
woods.
of nowhere in the
Yeah,
woods. Then you've got
The Shining,
The Shining, you've got Misery,
Misery. Yeah.
you've got,
Ooh.
oh good grief, so many
Does he do
books.
Dreamcatcher?
Yes.
Isolation.
Yep. Exactly. That it's a
Oh,
key tool, I think, with horror stories in particular, but also the ones that have a far more psychological hit to them.
no, but that's what I love about his stuff. It does that because you know me, when it comes to horror, I
Yeah.
like psychological horror. I love isolation because to me, isolation, that adds to the fear because where do you go? Who's going to hear you scream and all that kind of stuff? Whether when you're in the city, you feel like I could just run out into the street, people are there. Whereas when you're in the arsehole of nowhere,
Which is
do you know
very,
what I
very
mean?
similar in many ways to The Thing.
Yes, yes,
It
it
seems
is.
it does seem to be a very, very strong theme in an effective atmospheric horror
Yeah.
because it plays on your own insecurities and fears, kind of like
Oh,
the first 10 minutes
100%.
of Scream.
You what? Sorry.
It's kind of like the first 10 minutes of Scream.
Yeah, no, I agree. But that's what draws me into things like this as well, because I can also imagine, like when you watch anything Stephen King, obviously, not Carrie because I don't have those powers, but there's elements of it, I suppose. But like in general, stuff like this and The Body and the Shining and stuff like that, is you can imagine how you would act in those scenarios. You can
Especially
imagine
when
what
you've
you
got
would do.
no one to cry for help to,
Exactly.
because there
And
is
that's,
nobody.
yeah. And I love that. Like psychological horror is my favorite kind of horror. I think I don't need all the guts and the gore and all that kind of rubbish. I just want, you know, I just want my brain to be messed up. Sorry, that sounds really.
That's not weird at all, I say, looking at all my happy, beautifully bright coloured romance novels.
Yeah, no, I just like to be I do. I like
You like to be
all the
terrified.
Yeah, but I like it to mess with my head. That's what I like about horror. I love horror that messes with your head. And I know but then I think I've got quite a healthy brain. Do you know what I mean? No, but it doesn't mess with me the way it messes you. Yes, I mean because I'm on my own. I shouldn't say that. No, but anyway, by the time this goes out, my husband will be back. But like, I take precautions when I'm locking up and stuff like that. But without sounding weird, I don't really have mental health issues. Do you know what I mean? So I think that when you watch a lot of psychological stuff, for you, it messes with you a bit more because you do. That sounds really, you know what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
Ray?
I know what you're trying to say. I'm not sure if I like it, but I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, I mean, that is true. I can read a lot of horror, and I have done in the past. I don't read as much anymore because the horrors of true life have really come home to roost. So I try to avoid it. But I mean, this was one of those, it's a very, very quick read.
Yes.
It's not something I think I'd read again.
No. No, but you don't. I wouldn't need to. Like, do you know what I mean? Because I know what it's about, and I just wouldn't. And this is me we're talking to when it comes to reading.
Yeah.
I'm going to read something different because I'm not a big sit down
Whereas I'm
reader.
looking at a book I can't wait to reread.
I know when you told me it's like 650 pages, I'm like, oh God, I'll be dead before then.
No,
Before
that's
I
the
finish
next book.
that.
That's the
All
next
right.
book in the series. This one's only 500, I think. I think it's 500. I'm going to open it just to see, and it's got beautiful, beautiful. It's 498. So it's not too bad, but I've got to read it in time so I can read the sequel
Oh, very
with
nice.
everything fresh in my head.
Yeah, very nice. But
For
yeah,
sad
no, I
people.
wouldn't.
Anybody that knows me, I'm talking about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame.
Yeah, I won't be reading that. The next book I'm going to read is Carrie.
There you go.
Yeah. And then we'll come on here and talk about it. They're like, why don't you just start a Stephen King podcast?
Because you wouldn't be able to read through all of the books.
No.
Not one a
No.
month, anyway.
No, I wouldn't have patience for it. I know like you're a book podcast and you know, people that listen are probably big book readers, but I just, you know me, I just can't sit still. So that's why I like audiobooks, because I can do stuff while
Well,
I'm,
think about how you reacted when we talked about potentially doing Christine. And I said I think it's about 560 pages or something. And you're like, no, not happening.
no, I just wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to sit that long. It's not the reading that's the problem.
It's the sitting
Somebody needs
still.
to come up with a device that, you know, you can walk and read and
Yeah,
not get knocked over at the same time.
it's called a book.
Yeah, but I'm not, you know, I'm out and about, man.
I
I'll get
used
knocked
to walk
over.
to school, crossing 2 main roads, reading a book.
Yeah,
I'm
and that was
surprised I'm still
stupid.
alive, to be
Yeah,
fair.
exactly.
But then I have to say, I think the funniest thing I remember about reading and crossing the road was there's close to the central library in my town, there
Hmm.
are 2 sets of traffic lights and a pedestrian crossing. I came out of the library with a book I really, really wanted to read and started reading it as I was walking down the street. Got to the crossing, I clicked the button to wait for it to signal that I could cross the road. I didn't have to look at it because it makes a noise. Heard it make the noise, carried on walking and walked straight into the traffic light. Not myself a 6.
Enough said.
But I finished reading the book.
Well
Not at
done.
that particular instant. Obviously, I ended up in hospital, but I was fine. I didn't hurt myself. I just sent myself flying
So
into the road.
that's why you are the way you are.
No, this was actually only a few years ago. But yeah, it's one of those things. I think that everybody has their thing, and for me, sitting down reading a book is my idea of heaven, but it's not everybody's. And that's what I think podcasts prove is there are so many people out there with multitude of hobbies and interests, and they talk about what they want to, and they'll listen to what they want to.
Exactly. And I think that's why something like this, that's short, it's better for people like me. Like, I know we're going to think about doing Carrie, which I think is a couple of hundred pages, like 200 pages or something.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But yeah, for me, I don't have the patience for it because I'm just not a patient person. I like to be I like to be up
Yeah.
and about and pottering about. And I'm not very good at just sitting.
But when you think about how long this took you to read,
It didn't take me that long.
yeah, I think it's 1 hour and 40 minutes audiobook.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it didn't take me that long.
No, that's it,
I can
exactly.
read good.
I read it in my lunch break and then picked up another book.
Yeah, no, it didn't take that long. Yeah, I did stop a couple of times to make some notes. Had I not done that, it would have been quicker. Because I as well, I'm very forgetful. So I was worried that I would actually forget some things. One thing I did want to ask about it.
Yeah.
Do you think the locals knew about the grass?
I do wonder, but how many locals had fed the grass, grown the grass? Maybe the grass was protection for them against the rock and its abilities.
Yeah, because you think that kind of grass will get cut at some point because it looks like a field for a farmer.
Yeah, but then everywhere was abandoned.
Yeah. I just wondered that. I was
So
like, I
maybe
wonder.
it had been a town at some point, but who knows how long the rock had been there? Who knows how long the grass had been there?
Maybe the town was in the field. Because
Yeah,
in the movie, you have the mud people, don't you?
you do indeed. And you also have on the other side of the road a garage or a gas station that is
Mm.
surrounded by very, very tall grass.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, do you prefer or did you prefer the book to the film or the film to the book?
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't. there wasn't really a preference. I know that sounds probably a bit strange, but I
No.
enjoyed both. And I'll be honest, I think the book I enjoyed more, but I did like the Travis bit of the film. I
Yeah,
thought
'cause
that was a
it was an interesting introduction. It felt as though that was an element that perhaps needed to be in the book and wasn't, but only because we knew it was in the film.
yeah. I think if I had read this first, that's the thing. I think if we had read this first, I may have felt different because I know you get a lot of people that they read the book and then they watch the film and they're disappointed with various things.
Quite
I
often
don't
it's
know.
the character interpretation
Yeah.
that they have issues with.
Whereas I know this sounds weird, but I like to watch the film before I read the book.
No, everybody has their
Yeah.
preference. I'm
Yeah.
a book before film girl, but to be honest, I think if I'd read this book first, I don't know if I'd have been able to bring myself to watch the film.
Oh, because of the one scene we shall not
Yeah,
talk about.
because of the one scene we shall not talk about.
Yeah.
And also some of the disturbing things that Ross says in general.
Yeah. Yeah. When he gets a
There are
bit
certain things
rapey talk, I'm
there are
like,
certain
I
things
didn't
about
like that.
yeah, there are certain things about his character that make him unpalatable.
Oh, he's
And
vile.
yeah, if I'd read the book first, I'm not sure if I would have been able to bring myself to watch the film.
Because of
However,
him and this scene, the other
and
scene.
mostly because of that scene, and also
Yes, vile.
because of the hopelessness you feel as you're reading it.
Yeah, it's actually quite a depressing story when you think about it. Because like you
Yeah,
do feel like there's absolutely no hope for these people at
yeah,
all.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that is one of my it's that the hopelessness, the endless isolation, and
Mm.
that scene, and obviously Ross's character in general. I honestly think that had I read it first, the film would have been a no-go.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to I would have watched it, but I get I get where you're coming from. So that's actually quite interesting because we're doing like these crossovers. If you haven't read the book, maybe watch the film first.
Yeah, which is not something you'll hear me say very often, but I do think that I do believe it has a lot to do with maybe the two of them working together,
Mm,
that the particular style and the way that the story was told was gruesome and disturbing in so many ways. I mean, I
mm.
can cope with King, but I wonder if certain elements of it were Hill's contribution.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I think it was a very for me it was a very easy read. I'm not a fan of books where you see people sometimes you see writing of people and it's just like they're trying to sound I hope this isn't an insult to like Stephen King, but the way he writes, I feel like it's almost a certain element of the way you speak. Like it was very easy to read. I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I had to reread a line. And that's what I liked about it. Because sometimes you get books and you're just like, did you just have a thesaurus open while you were reading this? Like, do you know what I mean? It's just, okay, we get it. You're fancy. And that to me is boring. It's pretentious. Whereas when I read him, I'm like, no, I could sit and chat to Stephen King. I feel like I could have a conversation with him. Whereas some stuff I've read, I'm like, you're so boring because you're trying way too hard.
But you
It's
know
like you're
what
trying to
you
write an essay for uni or something,
yeah, you know what you like, and I think
Yeah.
that is half of the battle when it comes to finding a good book that you're go or a book that you're going to enjoy. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good book by everybody's standards. I'm thinking of several
Yeah.
books that I've read that everybody else loved and I really didn't. But it's one of those things, and not every single person's taste is going to be the same. I found that it was a very well written book, and the imagery that it produced in my head was I'm glad I wasn't eating.
You know what I will say though, and this is going to be an absolute massive compliment to you, right?
Yes.
I grew up with my mom and dad and my brother, three massive readers. I mean, massive readers. Okay. My best mate, Harry, massive reader. A lot of my friends, massive reader. And you're the only person that has got me to read stuff other than true crime. And I actually like doing it.
Yay. But then we're picking books that are in a genre that you enjoy.
That honestly, that wouldn't make a difference before. I've liked horror since I was a teenage, since I was a child, since I was in single digits. But I don't know, you've got me, because you wanted me to come on the podcast, you got me to do it. And then I was like, oh, I like this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well, that's
that's
the thing.
because
I
of
mean,
you.
I think the first book, physical book we discussed was
Is it
Practical
Practical
Magic.
Magic? Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was back
So
in February.
you've achieved something nobody else has, Ray. And my husband's a massive reader. Massive reader. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? It's just, I don't know. You
Listen to the
just,
Eisenhorn episode to
yeah.
hear Dev talk about one of his favorite books or
You must be
favorite
a witch.
series.
You must be a witch, Ray. What sorcery is this?
I don't know. That's the thing. I speak to people at work quite often else, and the first question I ask them is, "What kind of TV shows do you watch?" When they say, "I don't like reading anything," it's like, "Well, what kind of TV shows do you watch? Do you enjoy?"
Hmm.
And then go from there. And it's finding
Yeah.
the things that you're going to enjoy rather than making it feel as though you have to. And I think the problem always was as kids, not for me, but looking at my brother, my sister especially, who is not a big reader,
Hmm.
and she really, really did not like reading at all.
Hmm.
And I loaned her books that I really wish I'd never picked up in my life ever. The Flowers in the Attic series by Virginia Andrews.
I'm not reading that.
Yeah, and she read them, but by the time she was reading the second book, I was already round to my third reread and I had to borrow them back because
Do
I
they
read
go into
them.
detail in that in
Um,
the book?
yes.
Okay, I don't want to read it. There's certain things I will not touch.
And I'm guessing incestuous relationships is one of
Yes,
them.
don't want to know. Don't want to know. I will never do it.
Yeah, I mean, those books they're on a different level of disturbing, I think, to this particular book by Joe Hill and Stephen King, which is, I think it's very well written.
Hmm.
It's short, it moves very fast, and that's something I think helps with reading something with this particular type of content.
Yes.
If it's fast, it's still very descriptive. It's descriptive
Yeah.
enough that you still get the images in your head if you are that way inclined when it comes to reading, because I know not everyone is. Unfortunately, I saw everything uh, Technicolor with Dolby Digital Stereo. That was fun. But I think that that's what they intend when they write things like this.
Mm. Yeah. No, I
They want to
agree.
give you the nightmares.
Well, that's the whole point, I think, of this particular genre.
Yeah.
You need to, I know some people can, and that's fine because, there's certain stuff I wouldn't entertain, and I do a horror podcast and I read a lot of true crime, but there's still topics I won't go to because they're just too gross. Like, they're too much. But this, I find so far with Stephen King, I find him very easy to read, and like he tells a story the way I want to read it. Like, I find him very easy to follow. Whereas some books I've read, I'm just like, you've bored me. You
It
kind of
helps
lose me
that,
at the start. I'm just like, no, I wouldn't read. I know you can read a book that you're not really enjoying. I wouldn't
yeah,
be
I
able
do
to do
quite
that.
often.
I wouldn't be able to do that. If give me the first maybe 5 pages, if I was bored out of my head, I'd be gone.
I've
It's not.
unfortunately, I think that that's the way I struggle with the concept or the idea of DNFing a book. It's something really have to
What's that
fight
again?
do not finish.
Okay.
It's book talk. But I struggle greatly with doing that because I think that I owe it to the author, and I also have that fear that perhaps at the end something is going to change so much that I'm going to love it.
Well, a
It doesn't
lesson that was
often.
taught that a lesson that I suppose was taught to me for that, and maybe I shouldn't be so quick, is when we did the thing, what goes there.
Yeah.
Um, had I not been doing that for the podcast, I wouldn't have continued because I thought the first chapter was I was all technical talk. It just didn't interest me. But then I enjoyed it after that. So maybe I need to stop being so impatient and just kind of say, okay, and then just keep with it for a bit longer
Yeah.
instead of giving up so quickly.
With novels, a lot of people have the 50-page test. Obviously, with
Okay.
novels rather than novellas, because Who Goes There and this one,
Oh yeah,
In
they're
the Tall
short.
Grass, are very, very short. But
Yeah.
with a longer novel, people have a 50-page test. I have a 100-page test. But then I continue reading because it's like I'm 100 pages in, I've got
Might
400
as well go
pages to
on.
go, I may as well go on, even though I'm only a fifth of the way through it. I still persevere. It can take me a lot longer to read a book I'm not enjoying, which
Mm.
means that I do end up picking up other books in the interim. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think that there is something to be said for persevering occasionally, because you might
Yeah.
find a diamond in the rough. You might
Like
find
that with
that it was
films.
as rubbish it was at the beginning, but
Yeah, it's like with films, TV shows, sometimes it's good to stick with them because they can like Sex Education, the latest season. First episode, I was like, ugh. And then I actually enjoyed the rest of it. Not as good as the other seasons, but had my husband not been like, come on, we'll watch it, I wouldn't have gone back to it and actually
there's
ended up enjoying it.
that's the thing, there are a lot of, TV shows, films, and books that are exactly like that. The first couple of 100 pages or 150 pages aren't that great. The first 1.5 episodes suck,
Mm.
and you persevere because you like the characters or you know that it's going to get better, and quite often you're rewarded with something that's fantastic. Sometimes you aren't. There
Yeah.
are those, Buffy season 6, um, Veronica Mars season 3. You are rewarded with dross, but you just learn to roll with the punches.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. But luckily for us, this one was only 43 pages. So
Yeah, luckily, that's the thing. I mean, it was, as I said, it was very well written. I haven't got any problem with the writing style at all.
no,
It was just
not at
certain
all.
elements of the content were kind of unpalatable.
Yeah. No, and I get that. I get that. And I get why you wouldn't want to go to. I mean, I would have watched the film still,
Yeah,
but the film, there were elements of the film, that one particular scene, I was literally sat there going, because I don't think you'd watched it at this stage when I think I watched it before you.
you did.
Yeah. And I think I remember thinking, oh God, Ray's going to freak out when she sees this.
That's the thing. I think my biggest issue with the film was the length of it. There was so
Yeah.
much
Because it's quite long, wasn't
unnecessary
it?
it's like 1 hour, 40 minutes.
Was
There's
it?
so much, yeah, so much unnecessary exposition, because there's 2 different versions. I think one was the 1 hour 30, and
There's a third.
then there was the
Yeah.
extended version, which is the one that's on Netflix at the moment, and
All
it
right.
was
Okay.
just unnecessary content. There was so much running around in the grass and calling out and everything else that could have been done, as the book showed, so much quicker.
Yeah. They have to draw it out though, don't they?
Yeah, you see, I think it would have made, do you remember, Tales of the Unexpected?
Yeah.
I think it would have been a good 45-minute Tales of the Unexpected episode.
Yeah. But they put all that Travis stuff in, didn't they? And that's kind of what brought it out,
Yeah,
made it a bit
and a
longer.
load of stuff that was the mud people and
Yes.
all of
Yes. The
that
mud people.
was, and the flashbacks and the hallucinations and all of that stuff that was totally unnecessary to the story.
Yeah. Yeah. But they do that with film, don't they? When they use a book.
They do. Not
But
always.
yeah,
I mean, you look at The Body and Stand By Me and Misery.
films.
Yeah,
Great films.
exactly. And they didn't really extend the stories that much. I mean, Misery was actually, they cut bits out of the film because they knew that they couldn't use them.
Did we do the book for Misery? We did, didn't we?
We did
Yeah.
indeed. We did the book,
Yeah.
then we did the film, and see, but I think you audioed that one.
I ordered a book yet there. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad I read it though. I will say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So what's the next book on your list?
Carrie.
So going from horror to horror.
Oh, that's all I'm probably going to do. I couldn't do romantic ones. Oh my God. I wouldn't have the patience for that rubbish. Jesus. No, I love a good chick flick, but there's no way I could sit down and read a romantic book. No. Romance, no.
No, and I
Not
think
happening.
that science fiction would be a bit too
Oh,
scientific.
yeah, it depends how much. Maybe you can give me a list of books that don't go too much into the science of the
Well, that's
science
the thing. I mean,
fiction.
I think that one of the things that we talked about in that when we were talking about Who Goes There was that the style that was used was very, very similar to the beginning of Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, with the
Mm,
discussion about DNA and genetics.
yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe that's where he got the inspiration from.
yeah, maybe. But yeah, I don't. Yeah,
So
I'm probably going to stick with. I'm going to I'm going to actually go through his books actually because I'm actually really enjoying Stephen King stuff. So I think I'm going to just keep with him for now, and then I'll ask you about the next one. Dev
yeah,
used to read someone. Oh, Dean Koontz, is
Dean
it?
Koontz is a horror. He
Yeah,
wrote Phantoms, which is
yeah,
a good one. It's another isolation horror
ooh,
with
yeah,
weird creatures, so kind of thing-ish.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm going to go get some more of his, and then
They're very big though. Koontz
I'm not
like
doing the big ones. Tunes, yeah, no, I got a limit, man.
Koontz likes his big thick books. But there are I mean James Herbert writes quite
Mm.
his are probably around I'd say 200, 300 pages. But
Have
if
you ever
anybody
read any Grisham, John Grisham?
Yes, but I'm not a massive fan of the political thriller style book.
Fair enough.
It's not
Yeah,
really my thing. But if
yeah.
anybody has any suggestions or recommendations for authors that write in a Stephen King short story-esque style, send them on over.
Let me know. Maybe I'll start my own horror book podcast. One episode every 7 months.
Oh, good grief. That would, you could do that as a series within Once Upon a Nightmare. But thank you ever so much for coming on and talking about this. I don't think I'd have read it had we not discussed watching the film and then doing this afterwards.
See, I'm opening you up to other things too.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
Forcibly.
I do read King, but I haven't read as much of him in recent years at all.
That's because of me, basically. I'm
Yeah.
making you do it.
You are making me do the Stephen King, reading his newer works, because I think that I stopped reading his books in about 1993.
Yeah, I've heard a few people say that actually.
I think the
Yeah.
last one, actually, no, it was 96 when I read The Green Mile when it was published as a series of 6
Yeah.
books. Or was it might have been 7 books. They came as individual parts.
Yeah. Oh, oh well. Well, at least we're both doing stuff out of our comfort zones.
We are indeed. So thank you for coming on. Where can people find you?
I am on where am I? Instagram as Once Upon a Nightmare Podcast, and Threads is the same. And I'm on Facebook as Once Upon a Nightmare. And you can email me as once upon a nightmarepod@gmail.com. And I'm on every podcast platform as Once Upon a Nightmare Podcast or Once Upon a Nightmare.
Well, there you go. That was a quick summary. And again, I'm going to say it again. Thank you so much for coming on and for reading In the Tall Grass with me. If you want to hear us talk about the film, that episode will be following after this one. And Once Upon a Nightmare is released every Tuesday.
Yes.
And there is a very, very large back catalogue of true crime and horror films for you to enjoy, including most recently a series of John Carpenter films.
Yes. October, John Carpenter month. Loving it.
There you go. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you listen. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads as Being Bookish Pod, on TikTok as Being Bookish Reviews, and on X, which I still call Twitter, as Being_Bookish, though I've been a little quieter on all socials as of late. Or you can check out my website for the podcast back catalogue and full written spoiler-free book reviews at beingbookish.co.uk. Well, I've got a lot to get ready for next week, and I am really hoping that Waterstones pulls through and delivers my copy of Iron Flame, as that is the book I am hoping to be talking about. So until next time, this is me saying farewell.